All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started because it's 1:50, and being a former military guy, you know, 1:50 needs to start. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to balance. I got some cheat sheet notes up here on the technical side. I could talk at a fairly technical depth on some of these, but if you have hard questions, I might have to bail a little. So that's my disclaimer up front. Dr. Jacob Leffelholtz is our sports lead. So I told Freeman I'd come out and give more of a business kind of overview of sports and sports analytics. So if you're looking for a hardcore, deep dive on OR techniques for sports, this is more of we'll say an exposure briefing than a deep dive. So I'm going to go through these, but please, probably the way this could probably be most enjoyable for everyone is I'll take questions on the fly. I really wanted to gear this more towards kind of an interactive discussion, really about what we've learned in sports over the last couple years. But I'll get into that as we go going. So obviously from an overview, I'll talk a little bit who I am, kind of where I'm coming from, a little bit about Perduco. We're not necessarily a sports company. We're moving in that direction, but I'll talk more about that. And then obviously, like I said, I'll spend most of my time giving some highlights in terms of here's what we've been doing in sports, here's what we're learning in sports, kind of the good, the bad, and we'll call it the ugly. And then at the end there, but hopefully all along the way, I'll talk about some stories that we've learned and lessons learned. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask them along the way. But then I'll talk about, if I only knew, knew now only knew then what I knew now, what would I do differently? So real quick from a background perspective, kind of starting at the bottom, you can see I'm a pure OR guy. So I spent about 25 years in the Air Force. Actually, one of my former faculty and professors from West Point is in the room. So we'll make sure I do okay, so I don't get yelled at. But I'm a pure OR guy and spent about 18 years doing analysis for the Air Force. But as you grow in the Air Force, you kind of move up into more the management areas, and especially with some of the senior decision support. So in this time frame in here, especially here, which is for those that are non-military room, which is fine, is the idea that I worked for the 4-star. And where that became important is quickly kind of this understanding of how do you do OR and do analysis in a way that senior leadership and senior decision makers can understand. And then on my kind of the outbound side of what I did, I got to run the research center at AFIT, which is the Air Force Institute of Technology. And why that's critically important is I got to be an entrepreneur. So wearing a uniform in the Air Force, I got to grow a business. So I had a research center. We were about, $500K in external funding, and in about 2 years we grew to about $5 million. And that was really kind of doing this business development and marketing. How do you sell OR to the non-OR community, which is what we did. So the reason and that's kind of why I put this up here, so you can kind of see this progression. Fundamentally an OR guy. I tell people I haven't done real OR in about 15 years. But I can whiteboard with the best of them, So I love whiteboarding, and then I hire a lot of really, really smart people that still do OR and make me look really smart because all the things I promised, they deliver. And then I retired in 2011, and I won't say all, but as most OR people that like to solve problems, they're also very entrepreneurial by nature, and who wouldn't want to own their own company? So I started the Perduco Group with a friend of mine. She is the president. She's a 25-year CPA, CFO kind of minded. So we formed the Perduco Group, and then we've spun off Perduco Sports. So kind of where we are right now is I'm the vice president for the Perduco Group, the president of Perduco Sports, and we'll see kind of how things go moving forward. So that's kind of background. Been doing this for about 2.5 years, coming up on 3, so time goes by fast once you retire. So what is the Perduco Group? Before I get into the sports side of it, we're a data analytics company, which is interesting, talking to this type of group, I don't really have to explain a whole lot. So we have kind of hardcore, or we'll say core expertise in the data side. So we're talking large kind of enterprise data architecting, kind of Teradata, Oracle, kind of big, how do you integrate and aggregate big ugly data? Kind of from the informational side, both from kind of like a business intelligence, if you will, dashboards, data visualization, just kind of how do you take data and present it to decision makers in a useful way. And then obviously insight, so this idea of leading clients from data to decisions. On the far right there, when it talks insight, I'm talking, we'll say pure OR, predictive analytics. And so that's kind of our company from kind of a functional domain perspective. And then from a functional perspective, and then from a domain, we are primarily, and still today, a defense consulting company. Okay, so when we started in 2011, we started as a defense company, but if you're an analyst and if you're an OR person, you look around and you say, boy, these problems exist everywhere. Healthcare was one of the first strategic areas we decided to push into. And if you think, for those that understand a little bit about defense, oftentimes we think we're somewhat backwards in terms of how we use analytics and analysis in defense. Go to healthcare, it's a little bit scary, so if you go to healthcare presentations, but the data footprint there and some of the lack of analysis there is, we call that opportunity, but it's pretty scary. And then sports. So we tell people we're in these three domains: defense, healthcare, sports. And for the non-analysts in the room, not this room, but in the clients that I go talk to, they think, gosh, you're all over the map. And so I'll give you a couple examples real quick that'll kind of highlight that we don't believe we're all over the map. So the defense, they care about something called quantified warrior, which says, how do I understand and quantify the human individual by such that I can kind of optimize their performance on the battlefield. Okay? Healthcare cares about something called quantified self, which says, how do I take your decisions outside of the doctor's office and your lifestyles and your diet and your exercise and all the things outside of just your, how old you are and what sex you are and what you're predisposed from a disease perspective, and quantify that and be able to influence your healthcare. Okay? And then obviously sports, when we talk to the New York Knicks, they're very interested in how do I understand how behavior and choices off the court, especially when you look at a younger generation of players, affects and can drive performance on the court. So quantified self, quantified warrior, quantified self, and off-court behavior reflected on-court performance. From an OR perspective, it's the same problem. I'm just attacking it from a different domain and a different data set. So hopefully with the group here that makes sense to everybody, that we're not necessarily all over the map. We do kind of data analytics. The domain changes and the data set may change. So just real quick a little bit, now I'll get into the sports side. From a data, when we talk data, I'm not a data guy, I'm an OR guy. We have a lead here, so I'm kind of getting better. I do all our business development and marketing, so I'm the guy who gets to talk to everybody. So I can say some of the buzzwords around data, data quality and governance and stewardship and all that. But really it's about big, ugly data and how do I integrate that in a way now that I have something I can use. Okay? From the center section, like I said, more people talk about from a business intelligence perspective. Some of the tools on the bottom there: business objects, Cognos, Informatica, MicroStrategy. But how do I display data in a way that is useful? And then obviously, I fall over here on the far right, and much like the tool set at the bottom, especially over here, we're not a kind of a tool-centric company. So we're more of an applied mathematics, kind of pure consulting. We'll use whatever tool it is that might fit the job. In fact, we're bidding on some work right now in the modeling and simulation arena, and they're asking us, well, do you know Simio? Do you know Simio? And it's like, well, we know simulation. They're like, yeah, but do you know Simio? We're like, well, it's just another tool with a different syntax. But I understand there's an understanding to have a certain skill set. Question? Oh, okay. Like I said, feel free to stop me if you have any questions as we go. So just, and don't worry, I'm going to get to some sports. I know everybody's like, hey, I thought this was a sports talk. In the defense, again, just to give you an example, don't worry about this acronym soup down here. If you come from the defense world, you understand, all we speak is in acronyms. So this is just think defense clients. But like I talked about, some of the things with autonomy, agriculture is very interested in autonomy, automotive is very interested in autonomy, defense is very interested in autonomy. This intelligence, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Another quick example, we are very interested if I have some cameras over top of an area and I have a bunch of people on the ground moving around. I'd like to know what they're doing, what behaviors, based on the behaviors they're representing, maybe what predictive I can kind of learn so that I know their intent. Okay, so we care about that in the defense circles. Sports, anybody familiar with SportView? SportView, they just install those in all the NBA arenas around the country. Every single arena now has SportView, which are cameras above the arena that track a bunch of people moving on the ground, and we're very interested in their behavior, and we want to try to predict, based on intent and learn about it. So again, kind of this example of, hey, if you can do automatic target recognition, okay, automatic target recognition is something of interest here, and it's also of something of very high interest to the world of SportView and stats. Okay, so there's some different things that we do in defense. Healthcare, same kind of thing. These are some clients that we been talking to, meeting with. And then obviously, as an OR company, we struggle a little bit, especially as a new company. We're about 20 folks. About half of those are pure data people, and about half are pure, I'll say, analysts, like the group here. Is when we go in and meet with these people, they go, well, what do you do? It's like, well, what do you have problems doing? And we're here to help, kind of thing. But we've kind of been teasing different areas, from staffing and scheduling to classic process flow and optimization, and some of the data integration and data quality and some of the predictive analytics. So I'm going to keep going so I can get to some of the fun stuff. With sports, so we started in 2011. In 2012, and actually I'll tell you the story why we started in sports. Anybody familiar with AFIT, the Air Force Institute of Technology? Okay, it's the Air Force Graduate School in Dayton, Ohio. A good friend of mine, Jacob Leffelholtz, did his doctoral work in multivariate statistical analysis with a guy by the name of Ken Bauer. And not for his dissertation work, but for a class project, he did neural net predictive models for NBA outcomes. Okay, and he published it in IEEE Stat Journal on sports. And I was back at AFIT visiting, and I ran into Ken Bauer. And so for us on the academic geeky side, you kind of look at how many people download your abstract, or how many. Every now and then you'll get somebody that download like your full article, especially when they have to register for the journal and actually download it. And so I was talking to Ken Bauer, and he said they just went over 1,000 full downloads of the article. So I was like, holy smoke! I'm like one of these guys that make decisions on the spot, and I'm like, we're going into sports. There's a market there. So I quickly called Jacob, who's probably one of the smartest young guys I've ever met in my life. I said, Jacob, what are you doing? He's like, well, I work for a defense contractor, and I knew that because I helped him get a job. I said, would you like to come over and lead our sports analytics? And he's like, you guys do sports? And I said, well, depends. Is that a yes or is that a no? And so Jacob is our director. We call all things sports. So I convinced him to come over. So when he came over, immediately, he's an OR guy, I'm an OR guy, and we said, what are we going to do in sports? And so in 2012, we started dabbling in sports, really across the board. And that's one of my messages up front is we are very, kind of in the infant stages of sports analytics from a company perspective, okay? But we have this wealth of experience over the last 2 years doing what I call dabbling in sports. And that's really the intent of most of my talk today is, that's why I said, ask questions, I'll tell you what we've learned. We're very open, we're a very sharing company. We partner with a lot of folks to try to introduce them to sports clients that we know that we've kind of developed over the last couple of years. But you can see that kind of the area of sports is wide open. It's kind of like anything else in OR. It's like, man, what am I going to do? Well, you can do anything. You can do anything from, kind of front office stuff. In fact, what I'm hoping to do is throw in some stories along the way. Is one of our first clients that we met with was the Cleveland Indians, which, by the way, they have a very rich organic OR capability analysis shop. They're one of the kind of the front runners in the MLB. So Keith Woolner, it's one of those, so-and-so introduced us to so-and-so. When we went out and met with Keith Woolner, and of course my job is to tell him how smart we are, because, I'm the sales guy. So I'm like, hey, we're really smart. And I said, we want to do, not to finish, but we want to do the sexy stuff. I want to tell you who to pick in the draft and who to play, kind of the Moneyball stuff. We want to do the sexy. And he's like, well, I have people that do that. He said, but it'd be nice to have someone help me kind of model the stadium from a discrete event simulation perspective, and queuing and beer lines, and how much staff do I need, because not only do I got to predict ticket sales, but I have to be able to set my staffing and vendor staffing, if you will, 2 weeks ahead of time because of unions. And of course, being the very naive business guy that I was at the time, what do you think I told Keith when he asked me to do that study? No. I said, well, no, we don't want to do that. See, there's somebody that's a little more seasoned and senior than I am. He's like, well, yeah, because you were dumb and you told him no. Well, yes. So I made the mistake when he said, hey, we don't want you to help us with the kind of the close hold, very team, we'll say critical stuff. But we have this other OR stuff we'd love your help with. It's like, well, we want to do the cool stuff. No, we're not going to do that. So mistake number one, if you ever go into sports and they ask you to do something, we'll say non-cool or non-sexy, definitely say yes, because why? That gives you a chance to build relationships and understanding and get credibility within the space. So this is some of the things we've been doing. I'm going to go kind of more into detail and kind of scope now in terms of shaping what exactly we've done. So over the last 2 years, as we've come out of this, it really boiled down to 4 major thrusts in sports for us. So this is us from a company perspective. Now I will tell you, we're looking at this from a business perspective, from a company. How do I grow a company in sports? Okay, there are a lot of people in the domain that do, we'll say, independent consulting. Especially there are a lot of faculty, there are a lot of academic folks that do, we'll say, sports consulting on the side. There's a lot of folks that are doing it just kind of as an individual, but we're kind of really going at this as kind of corporately as a company. Is there a play, is there a business model for having a sports analytics OR company? And as we did that, these are kind of the 4 major business lines that we've been kind of pushing on. Team consultation, some of the fantasy business to business, and gaming. Okay, so now we're gonna be a little careful at the bottom here. Gaming, handicapping, prediction, betting. Okay, that's the betting side of the world. Okay, so I'll walk through some of these, and then I'm going to go and I'll give you some OR examples. So team consultation, and this is kind of like I said with the Cleveland Indians, is very, as you can imagine, very difficult market to break into, because at the team level, one, most teams now are hiring analysts. Okay, and my last few slides, I got some lessons learned and stuff, but most of them I'll probably cover along the way, and then we can just recap them. But one of the things you'll find in sports is it's kind of the 30 under 30 crowd, if you will, where they can go out and find somebody that desperately wants to be in sports, very smart, but basically they'll come work for free, right? So one of the things is we go and meet with teams, and we'll say a kind of high-end data analytics company, especially familiar with defense. I mean, we're a high-end defense analytic company, so kind of the folks that we're hiring, most of the folks that we hire on the OR side, PhDs in OR, a lot of experience. So when we go in to do team consultation, just fundamentally from the get-go, depending on who we're sitting with, if we're sitting with the lead analyst, we're here, and a lot of times they're right out of their undergrad. Okay, so we're talking kind of, we'll say predictive analytics and optimization, a lot of that stuff, and they're, smart folks, but a lot of times don't have maybe the background of experience and understanding and haven't done a lot of projects. So, in the sports world, from a consulting perspective, our goal is, hey, let us come in and help you look really good with your bosses, right? That's what we do as consulting. Let me, if you're the analyst, let me come in and make you look really good to your boss, so you'll get promoted, and then you'll keep hiring me, right? I mean, that's kind of what we do as consultants. But in the sports world, they're very nervous and hesitant, because if you're doing something they can't do, then, they're going to get pushed out on the draft, and then you're going to get recruited. It's kind of like this sports mentality, like, well, I don't need you as my director of analytics, because this player over here is a lot better, so I'm going to let you go in the off season, and I'm going to hire this person. And so it's kind of this weird dynamic. And in fact, Jacob, my lead analyst, he gets job offers from every NBA team we go visit. We'll leave, and on the way back, on the way back home, they'll call him and go, hey, this is the GM from NBA team 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Would you like a job? And that's one of my running jokes when we go in now is, you can't hire Jacob. We'll talk to you about OR, but you can't hire Jacob. So we've dabbled a little bit. We've done some stuff with the Golden State Warriors on some scout scheduling optimization. You'll see that. We've talked, probably NBA's been our biggest push. So we talked about 8 or 9 or 10 NBA teams. But fundamentally, we've really just been working with the Golden State Warriors. Because you got to find a team either A, that doesn't have an organic shop. You like the ones that have a nice, robust organic footprint, like the Houston Rockets. Okay, they have a nice kind of high-end understanding of analytics, because at least now I don't have to convince them of why analytics is important. But then immediately I'm faced with the problem is, well, we have an organic shop, so why do we need you? And then if you go to the team that has maybe no or very limited organic capability, you spend all your time trying to convince them, hey, this is really important and useful stuff, and then you got to try to get to the return on investment line. So we've done a little bit of team consultation. Some of the player evaluation, we've done some stuff at the NCAA level. It's easier to get in, but again, I'll try to kind of keep mentioning from a business perspective, you can imagine the revenue's not necessarily there from NCAA teams. Very willing to let you come in and help them. And so we've done some of that because a lot of those NCAA coaches know folks on the professional side. So in fact, that's what we did. We did some work from Mount St. Mary's and some other NCAA programs, with the idea of a wedded intro to someone that may have that thing that we, all elusive thing called revenue that we continue to search for. Fantasy, I'm going to come back to. Business to business, what we quickly found was, as you can tell, I may look like a sports guy, okay, but at the whopping 5'9" with a 3-inch vertical, and now over the hill with 4 knee surgeries, I'm not a dominant soccer player, tennis player, basketball, or hockey player, and I don't come from the sports world. I come from the defense world. And so it's very hard breaking into a new sector, as we all know. And so we quickly kind of went down this road as we kind of, got a lot of doors shut in our face here, did a lot of free work just to try to convince them we're smart. And even once we did, it was still kind of hard to gain traction. And even the traction that we did, most people will work for free up on the team consultation side because they just want to do sports. Again, we're trying to develop a business model. So where we'd have, all 4 of us would go in, you're young, you just want to come work for free because you want to be a GM for the NBA team one day. You're a professor, you just want to work for free because you like sports. And you haven't figured out what you're doing, but sports sounds really cool, but you'll work for free. And then I'm there going, hey, for $50K, we could do a quick study for you. And they're like, yeah, there's something out of whack here. And I go, oh, but we're really smart. And believe it or not, even the people doing free work are incredibly smart. Okay, incredibly smart. So from a business perspective, we quickly jumped down here. And we said, hey, we could partner with companies like Stat Sheets. And this is actually a sports agent where we actually said, okay, you have relationships in the industry. So like Stats, we got lucky because they're up in Chicago. So we drove up there a couple times. We said, you have what we as analysts die for, which is data, right? They're the largest provider of statistical data to the sports industry. And we have what we call, we bring value to data. Okay, so you collect data, and then we do really quick, really kind of crazy, wicked smart things with data. And I'll show you one in a minute here, but we did some stuff with Stats. And also that brings us credibility in the space. Okay, so we quickly kind of partner with some of the known players out there, do some things, and then kind of bring that forward with kind of a known stigma associated with it or reputation associated with it versus you're Perduco and you're a defense company and why are you here in my office kind of thing. Gaming predictions, we routinely kind of sit down with folks and our opening line there is we beat the bookies. Okay, and that's kind of what we do. When Jacob wrote his article predicting NBA outcomes using neural nets, in fact, the last 3.5, 4 seasons, we had 2 seasons at 63% against the spread, 1 at 70%. And this year, if you follow the NBA, it was incredibly strange. We were like at 54, 53, 54. But go ahead.
Obvious question that comes from me
Yeah.
is, why do you even bother with the rest of the stuff and just invest the money?
In fact, that's a very good question. Yeah, so we'll answer that in a couple different ways. So one, by the way, it's the number 1 question we get asked. In fact, no, they ask it a little different. First, they say you're lying. Every person that we've told that to, they said you're lying. And Bill knows me. Actually coming from my background, integrity is a big thing. So I'm like, one, not only that offends me, but okay, but let's get past that. 2, I can show you the data, right? I can show you 4 seasons of predictions prior to game. Here's the outcome, here's predictions. I can show you, 2 seasons at 63, last year at 71, and this year at a struggling 54. In the second place, they, first they say you're lying, and then when I tell them I'm not, it's most of the time they don't even believe me that I'm not lying. They say, well, you're an idiot. No, literally, that's what they tell me. Because they said if that's really true, you'd be in Vegas, not here. So when we spun off sports, in fact, we looked at headquartered in Vegas because companies in Vegas, it's legal. Okay, now I'm a defense company, right? So primary defense pays the bills, okay? And defense is really kind of our heritage of where it started as a company. I have a TS facility clearance, okay? So with a TS facility clearance, top secret, when I have a top secret facility clearance, I can't be involved in gaming directly, right? So what we're trying, and I'm an analyst, right? So I don't care if I have a 63% model, I know, right? Unless I'm willing to invest on every single game, right? But I also know that I could lose 20 games in a row. It just happens. So being an analyst, so what we tell people is, we're not trying to bet with the models, we're betting on the models that other people will buy those for what they can do. But that's also, from a business line perspective, is an interesting one. One of the things you have to do very quickly is you need to decide which side are you on. So you can be on the side of the house, right, and help set the line, or you can be on the side of the gambler and help beat the line. But you very quickly got to decide which. But yeah, everybody asks that question. The easy answer is, when we first started, we knew we were never we're not looking to become professional gamblers. But we definitely are looking, so we have received revenue in this domain, or in this business line, if you will, from folks that are very interested in our models. Yeah, absolutely.
If you remember the financial disaster that was long-term capital gain, they made lots of money really early, at high audit cost, same winning percentages they talked about. And then it gets smaller and smaller. Is it possible that people have taken your guys' model, looked at it, and are also in there, and therefore the market has changed?
In fact,
is that drawing? down as the market has changed over what you did analytically. Because in a way, gambling is like the financial markets, where you've got people betting one way or another.
Right. So I had so 2 things. One, in fact, Sheldon and I had a brief talk about this exact thing. As analytics becomes more prevalent in sports, sports will change, including gambling. But a lot of gambling is driven by the non-informed, right? Or the non-analytical. So, and where we are in sports, we're at the infancy of analytics in sports, from my opinion. In fact, one of the things, we were just at the MIT Sports Conference last month here in Boston. We had a booth there. And for us in the analytical community, we mean something by analysis, right? What that means, what it feels like, and what it is. And if you look at sports analytics, I would say they're really at the data visualization level. Okay, so they're really, where they are in the maturity of analytics is really data visualization. So one, I don't think we're quite there yet, that our model's suffering because now the analytics has infused itself. I think it was just a really, 54 is not bad against the spread, but this year was just really a fun year. So I think maybe eventually, maybe it'll hone in where there won't be as much of a spread opportunity there, but I don't think quite yet. So I'll kind of table that for a little bit, but you're right, a lot of people ask us why we're in Vegas. And then fantasy, our biggest push right now, again, if you look at all four of these, the question that we always ask ourselves is, where's the money? I mean, that's where we're coming at this from a perspective, right? We're a company, consulting company, defense company, product, moving more toward a product company. We want to know where's the revenue, okay? There's tiny bits of revenue here, I think. You can do some independent consulting, but it's very, dollar-wise, it tends to be pretty low. There's money here, okay? Now it depends, you gotta be careful, you gotta decide what you're gonna do. Jacob, when he graduated his PhD, had 2 phone calls, and they said, come to Vegas for an interview, and if you come, you're taking the job. Okay, and he's like, well, I think I'm gonna skip on that interview. Okay, and I'm being very genuine. He had a couple companies that said, no, we'd just like you to come out, and we'll tell you who we are once you get here. But there's room there, but from a pure company business perspective, you gotta be a little careful there. There's a great opportunity here. I'd say, if you can really, there are people out there that do understand sports that are starting to see the value of analytics. And so they don't have OR people, if you will. So they're quickly trying to go out and kind of grab them. So there's a little bit of a market there. But our big push is fantasy. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And especially as fantasy and gaming start to merge, when you look at daily games and weekly games, and you're starting to do now where they're, fantasy is becoming really an industry in itself. And then on the gambling side, you're starting to see where they're going to start, with mobile apps, you can bet on each play, bet on the next, the next point score, all that kind of stuff. So some of the fantasy stuff and some of the gaming stuff and some of the online, kind of merger of those two fields are really where we see Perduco is where our biggest push right now is in fantasy. I'm going to go through a couple detailed examples, and this is kind of the analytics for the group. So if you have questions, I got my cheat sheet here. I'll do a pretty good job of trying to answer most of those. And then I'll show some quick pictures, and then I'll kind of get to the end where we can ask more questions. Probably one of the first things that we did, and I got to keep an eye on time because I love talking about this kind of stuff. We got about 20 minutes or so. One of the first things we did is we went up with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I got some of these stories. I got to make sure I don't mention the teams. We want to protect the innocent or otherwise. But we went up and we were talking with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we just asked them. We said, "Hey, give us an example. What's something that we could do that would be useful?" And the topic came up as scout scheduling. Travel and salesman problem, right? For all of us, it's like scout scheduling. Well, how do you think they do it in the NBA? Come on, question for the field.
Whiteboard.
Piece of paper, whiteboard, right? And I kid you not. So again, I worked for the 4-star. So for me, senior leadership time is incredibly valuable, right? So I'm talking VP level and up, front office, C-suite, 3 stars, 4 stars. Incredibly valuable is their time. So the GM for the NBA team gets on ESPN.com or gets on, the NCAA websites, starts printing off NCAA schedules for the week, grabs a white highlighter, spreads them all on the table, okay, and starts highlighting. Where should my scouts go? Okay, so for us in the room, you're like, you got to be joking, right? And I'm like, no, really. And we've talked to at least a dozen NBA teams, and they all do it by hand. So you'd say, oh my gosh, opportunity, right? So we very quickly, and Jacob's a Python guy. And so, in fact, Ben Alamar, who's very well known in the sports analytics side, from a consulting perspective, his kind of running joke is find someone that knows neural nets and Python, and you're halfway there. So we do a lot of neural nets, a lot of Python. But in this case, we said, it's optimize scout scheduling, right? I'm going to maximize game watchability, minimize, we didn't minimize expense because we weren't rolling in, the cost of tickets and stuff, but we're minimizing travel. And it's a travel salesman problem. I mean, really, when it boils down to it. So we wrote some heuristics, and I'm going to walk you through some individual slides, but the big picture kind of is, how do you visualize the data? Okay, by the way, this, which is all it is a database filter based on the NCAA games for the season by venue, okay, by calendar, by venue. You would be shocked at the response I get by showing blue dots on a map. I mean, ooh, ah. And I'm like, no, I haven't shown you the cool stuff yet. But this, they're amazed at because they don't have an aggregate view of the data. Okay, so that is all that's intended to be. When we talk about the individual players, these are my perspective list. We were trying to get them to understand is you want an overall infrastructure. So you want to tie your games in with your perspectives, in with the schedule that you have in front of you and the constraints, right? Constraint-based optimization. So I can build you a schedule. So I'll go through a couple slides that kind of walk through that a little bit more. So obviously our goal, like I said, was to improve efficiency and effectiveness of the team. And we're talking for, we'll say the ground troops, the folks, the scouts that are out there week in and week out traveling, and not the the GM that's going to go to 2 or 3 slot games and just fly and see their top recruit and do that kind of stuff. But we want to be able to do, one, we wanted kind of this all-inclusive tool. What we quickly realized too is, boy, you got to put it in something they can use. It's something, I'm one of these guys that I don't really like to hide the math because I try to get people to understand the math. So one, they're not scared by the math, and plus they don't think it's voodoo magic, but you got to hide the math. Okay, so you put it in a way they can use it. We got some algorithms in the back, and you really got to give them this easy-to-use interface. Really give them a chance to be able to see it, play with it, touch it, feel it, that kind of stuff. Obviously, from a visualization perspective, like I said, our only goal was to ingest the data, all the schedules, and then visualize those, and then give them the opportunity to manipulate the schedules to see, hey, what games are coming up, what are we doing, that kind of stuff. And Perduco, corporately, we're very interested in, one, we're an 80% solution kind of company, just give them something they can use to start using to make a difference. And also, we try not to hide stuff from them. So, we're not really a software company, so we're kind of a custom application development company. So we leave everything unlocked so they can adjust things and they can kind of change their perspective list, their dates, all that kind of stuff. So we did the map, and then really the idea was ingest it all, like I said, how do you maximize game watchability? Now, game watchability, I don't have a slide on it. I'm not a sports guy, right? Now, Jacob is. He's simply an amazing guy. But we had to come up with an objective function, right? So what's an objective function for game watchability? Anybody? What makes a good game in basketball? Yes, evenly matched teams, and that's exactly what we did, right? So we're OR people, so it's like, well, I got to have game watchability. So, well, if it's 5 number ones against 5 number ones, I'm a pretty happy guy. If it's 5 number ones against Podunk U, okay, yeah, probably not that good of a game. So we did a weighting scoring based on the relative ranking of the perspective and then the numbers facing each other in the game. And we fully populated that, and we weighted it. So basically, if you had a no-name, your third-tier perspective, one of those, and a 1/3 tier perspective playing against each other, that game wasn't worth very much. Now, we also wrapped in the heuristic is, once I've seen you once, we gave them the functional capability to say, how many times do I want to see them per season? So once I've seen them once, the value of seeing them again quickly tails off. So we kind of integrated all that into what we call game watchability. And so this was the visualization side. So each of these blue dots represent a game, and this happens to be on December 3rd. Okay, so this is where I got to be careful on mentioning teams. So we were sitting with one NBA team, not to be mentioned here. And literally they were like, wow, this is amazing. This is the most exciting thing we've ever seen. Right? And everybody in the room's going, well, isn't that just a database filtering system to plot blue dots on a map? And I would go, yeah, actually that's what it is. And so then we do that, so we can show them that. And then we say, all right, what are your constraints? Okay, so this is like drive time, how many days a week you got to work, how many days off do you have, how many times you want to see a player, all those kind of things that we know are going to drive the optimization in the background. Okay, and then we said, okay, I talked a little bit about it, but the idea was I want to see as many games as possible. So what we did for the heuristic is we did a nearest neighbor kind of algorithm, and we looked for where are there two games that I can see in a single day. Because I get double game watchability points. So I kind of went out and looked at, hey, if I got a game in Dayton at 1 o'clock, okay, there's probably a game in Columbus maybe I can make or something like that. So we searched the space, if you will, and found 2-day games, 2 game days. And then around that, we built a schedule going forward. What games could we add in the schedule going forward? And then once we reached the end of the calendar that they were requesting for, we built the schedule going backwards. And then basically we kind of ranked order all the days of the season or the days of the window they requested, built all those starting points, built all the schedules forward and then backward, and then within that selected an optimal. So it kind of really was a nearest neighbor heuristic. Okay? And again, we gave them the ability to change game watchability and what that means and all that kind of stuff. Now, of course, we pull up that screen and it's all numbers. And quickly they go, oh, close that out, close that out. Just show us the answer. So that's what we do. We say, well, here's the answer. And we built this in about 3 weeks. So we took about 3 weeks to build the database, ingest all the data, write the Python script code, write the algorithm in the background, and then solve what we believe is near optimality in about 20 seconds. So this is a 2-week schedule that we would pop out of this. And you can see there's 2 games here. There you go, West Point. There you go, Army. Come on, go. 2 games up here, North Carolina, Kentucky. Obviously, North Carolina, Kentucky, you can see, and we put, so they could see is who are the perspectives. This was not this last season, but a season ago. Who's playing in the game, so we could give them that. Okay? So very quickly they could see, in fact, we were with one team, and we pulled up the screen when we hit solve, right? Hit the magic button, hit solve, and about 15 seconds later, this comes up, and there was this big audible sigh. This guy's like, ugh. And I'm like what? And he's like, it took me 2 years to build an Excel spreadsheet with all possible venue combinations so I could find where we could go to 2 games in one day. Because he built a spreadsheet, right, and color-coded it with all possible combinations and then tried to find, based on time when the games were, when they could get to 2 games in one day. And it's like, well, if you let the computer do it for you, it's a little quicker. And in fact, we could find 3 game days, and then he left it. He's like, all right, never mind. And then we allowed them, we give the ability to say, hey, I don't like the schedule, I want to pull one out, add one in. So at the end of the day, we gave them an optimal schedule. Okay, I might kind of keep going a little bit faster, just want to make sure I leave some time for questions. Switching gears, we did anybody value-focused thinking, multi-objective decision analysis, okay, value model kind of stuff. That's all this is, right? Is how do you give a team a systematic and kind of, structured way to do decision-making on player evaluation. So we call this aggregate player evaluation, aggregate, assessment of players. But the idea is how do you build metrics that make sense to the scouts, right, in their terminology? How do you define metrics in a way they understand it? And give them rankings, give them, scales to associate with that. And then how do you do, we put this on there because it scares them. That's the easiest math function for our world. It's like, okay, that's a weighted average. We all know that. That's all it is. But it's got, Greek stuff in it, so they don't look at it. But at the end of the day, we can rack and stack players, okay? And more importantly, we can start looking at specific, how do I understand what the model's doing for me? So I'll jump through a few of these. And so we typically build it in an interface tool so the client can use it. So this was done in Excel. Sure, open up the screen. And then we gave the ability for each position. So this would be like kind of a tablet app. The scout would sit there at the game and go, I'm watching a point guard, pull up, the point guard, put in the name. And then here are my metrics I'm going to evaluate. And I had a little drop-down menu so I could score them. How fast are they? What's their passing like? And we used terminology that they understood so that there was some consistency across scouts. Okay? And then obviously some notes down at the bottom. And then the ability was, as soon as I finished, I could hit submit. I could see where the player ranked and stat. I could see, hey, he may be number 6 on the list, but he's the top point guard. So all this in kind of a consistent framework for scout evaluation player assessment. Actually, Mount St. Mary's out in the DC area, we actually developed this for them, and then we showed it to some NBA teams, to try to get some traction. And so I'm going to jump through because I want to show. These are just some, obviously if you do multi-objective decision analysis. The one thing we went to one NBA team, and we knew the owner of the team was interested in this side of it, which is you can kind of scout the scout. So with a system like this, you can not only get a kind of consistency across player evaluations, but you can kind of see which scouts always rank people high, or which ones, you can go back and look which players turned out well and which scouts said they were either good or bad, which ones were failures, but oh, the scout always said they were good. So we gave them the ability to kind of scout the scout, look at how the different evaluators and different scouts are going. And then obviously with any type of multi-objective kind of work, as I can quickly look at players, and it's hard to see, but hey, they're missing speed and they happen to be missing whatever that green block is, competitor. So that's why Rob Manning would fall low because of these certain categories. You can very quickly kind of articulate back to the scouting staff, why is your player that you're trying to argue for fall low. So I'm going to go through some last few slides, and then I apologize for running right to the end, but we'll answer some questions. This was part of our Stats Incorporated. We used pretty much any technique and method we could throw at it, was to identify or categorize NBA players. So based on NCAA performance, how are they going to fall out from an NBA perspective? Now, I will tell you, your data is pretty sparse at the A and the D level. Okay, so obviously our numbers aren't that well. But in the B and the C, which by the way, not only that's where all the players are, that's really where you make your money. Because you know who your franchise player is, and what you need to do is recruit B players to build around that franchise player and not recruit the C players that aren't going to make it in the league. So you can see down here some of our accuracies using neural nets and some other things. Centers, we were not about 90% accurate, but really you can see we're about 75 to 90% accurate in terms of categorizing NCAA players. Let me make sure I say this right. Categorizing NBA performance performance as an NBA player based on your NCAA performance. Okay, and we did that marrying up with what they wanted from a player. So really, they racked a bunch of known players, and then we trained against that, and then evaluated the NCAA players, which ones would match those categories. And then, obviously, we kept on a training set, and we went back and tested how we do from an accuracy perspective. So this was a cool thing that we did, and really the idea was when you go to the summer draft, okay, look at the B players. You know who the A players are. There's hundreds of B players, or hundreds of B and C players at the summer leagues. But go and look at these 20. Again, from an analyst perspective, I'm not saying this is who you want. I'm saying at least look in this group and now use subject matter expertise that you do have that I don't. This one was interesting. This was for the scout for the Houston Rockets, not for a scout, for a sports agent that had a player with the Houston Rockets. And the Houston Rockets were going to draft him, and one of the pushbacks were, one that's not shown in here was he doesn't get enough rebounds. So we quickly showed him where his rebounding opportunities, so his rebounds per rebounding opportunity were above his peers, but he wasn't, he was on the court when there weren't rebounding opportunities. But what we did is we took a year's worth of data on this slide, and we looked at, real quick, just to save time, above the line is good. Above the line is when he's in the game, and below the line is when he's out of the game, and that's opponents scoring per minute. So over a game, the opponent, since obviously we don't want them to score a lot, this is bad. So when this player was on the bench, the opponent scored more, okay? And when he was in the game, the opponent scored less. Down here, we looked at how did the Houston Rockets, how was their field goal percentage? So when he was in the game, they were a better scoring team, field goal percentage-wise, than when he was out of the game. And what we're really about it down to is you can look at his first, second, third, fourth periods of the game, fourth quarter of the game, is they were playing him in really the first and the third, and he was more productive in the second and the fourth. So through analytics, we were allowed to go back in and show them statistically, and a team like the Houston Rockets, they understand this type of analytics. So it was somewhat useful in terms of supporting his case to the scouts. PitchFX, anybody familiar with PitchFX data? Okay, so we were with the Cleveland Indians, and we were trying to, of course I'm the sales guy, so hey, we're really smart, you should hire us. And they said, well, we're not going to hire you, but if you want to show us how smart you are, go look at PitchFX data. So it's like every pitch, where it lets go, where it hits, kind of the movement of the ball, the speed of the ball, that kind of stuff. So we had an intern, and so this wasn't necessarily Perduco corporate, but it was an intern that we had working for us, did some Bayesian probability. So down here you can see kind of a heat map based on drop-down menus that you select the catcher-pitcher combination, where you are in the pitch count. You can see from a heat map perspective where the next pitch is going to be. Okay, so obviously the darker the red, the more likely, the more probable that pitch is going to be there. The upper left, and then we said is, now that we know that from a joint probability perspective, we could predict not just what is the next pitch, but where is it going to be. Okay, so up there we did a kind of a simulation. We said, look, we could take the data and predict both pitch, type of pitch, and location of pitch We were about 60% accurate doing that. So the neat thing is, we went back up to Cleveland Indians, we started showing them this, they're like, yeah, we've done that. When we started showing a predictive capability, they're like, oh, we've never done that. So it's kind of a neat intern exercise that we did. I kind of joke and go, at the World Series, you got the little box that shows you where the ball hits. You could put the Perduco logo right next to it, and we can tell you where the next one's coming. Now, we didn't quite figure out how to operationalize that. The third base coach, hey, the pitch is going to come. It's a split-fingered fastball on the high right side. But the idea was, at least from an analytics perspective, you can show that it actually works. I'm going to skip a couple of these just to get to the end and allow some questions and answers. This was just working on how do I assign scholarships. And it's more than just how well the athlete does in the drills, is they only want to assign scholarships if they think they're going to take them. Otherwise, they lose their scholarship if someone goes off to somewhere else. Some of that social network analysis stuff you could roll in. We were looking at predicting NCAA All-Americans, so we'll just jump down for this group to the Truth Matrix. So of the 43 that we tested on, there were 3 All-Americans. We captured all 3 of those. We overclassified 6, which is good, so we didn't miss any. And so we were about 90% accurate in terms of using a host of techniques, nearest neighbor neural networks, to predict, based on combine data, NCAA All-Americans. I'm going to do one quick time check, because I want to... All right, I got about 5 minutes. Fantasy. So real quick, that's Ask Max. So if anybody play fantasy, football fantasy, okay, daily games, weekly games, how do you choose a team based on projections given a salary cap? We call that a knapsack problem. So we actually built a tool to do that. There's about 93 quadrillion combinations if you want to enumerate them. We actually built some heuristics to get around that from a kind of speed up perspective. And we can build your weekly game, daily lineup in about 15, 20 seconds heuristically. The funny thing is, we're partnering with a fantasy company, actually fftoolbox.com. And so the week 16, they do the $1 million fantasy, week 16 $1 million fantasy pick. And our algorithm beat all their experts with no user input. So just letting it run based on the heuristics, it beat all the algorithms. This here is kind of a heat map, where a shot's taken for. We kind of converted to an intensity map. Kind of like I told you about in terms of analytics. This, I've got more traction off this one picture than anything we've done in sports analytics. Because we put it on the web, and you can drop down, I want to show me where this quarterback is thrown in the 4th quarter and all their completions. And in 2 seconds, it displays a heat map. People are like, that is just absolutely amazing. And we try to go, that just write the check. That's just brilliant. But to this group, you guys are all looking going, okay, but you didn't do anything, okay? But that's why I would say the state of the art of sports analytics is in data visualization. But we're excited. I mean, we're partnering with Full-Time Fantasy. We're going to release some premium analytics to their 10 million users. And hopefully from a revenue sharing perspective, it'll work out well for Perduco. Opportunities, and I've kind of talked about this, countless opportunities in sports. Sports Analytics Conference, a couple thousand attendees every year. I will definitely tell you that descriptive statistics, kind of the foundational Moneyball, how do you do advanced statistics, but more of a descriptive nature. Some of the first level analysis, and really when they think advanced analytics, they're really talking heat maps. Now, I say that, I gotta be a little bit careful because I'm not broadly painting the entire sports industry, but a lot of people, that's what they hear. When they hear advanced analytics, they're thinking heat maps. There are niche professional teams that have very high-end analytic and robust capabilities. Okay, the Indians, the Rockets, there's a number of them. But in general, the sports industry, heat maps is the state of the art. Okay. Some of the barriers, I mentioned this, kind of the 30 under 30. If you're a high-end OR person, you want to switch to sports, I hope you love sports. Okay? Because the one reason I don't get too nervous when they call Jacob for a job offer is, let's just say we pay him well because we know the value of high-end OR, okay, and we believe in recruiting the right people, and they're going to offer him a third of what we pay him. Now I say that, but as his reputation grows, some team will finally just give him what he wants. But there's a lot of them out there that are very, just want to be in sports. They're doing it almost for free. They're very sensitive to outside help because they don't want to get overshadowed by someone that comes in and actually can do things they can't. Very protective of their data. So we have a TS facility clearance. We work in the classified domain. I know how to protect data, right? I'm very good at protecting data. No offense to you on the athletic side, but my data over here is a little more important. It's called the defense of the nation. It's called lives at stake, and you're talking about winning basketball games. But I have an easier time getting data here than I do over here. So that's the thing, it's very challenging to get data. And then this still exists. I just don't believe it can be done. And so you really got to kind of build the case of, and that's why we do a lot of prototype stuff. We do a lot of demo, a lot of prototype. Give us some data, we'll come back and show you what you can do with it, because they still don't believe that applied mathematics can be useful. And again, a lot of this is just, I'm making some generalities. So if I knew, kind of knew then what I know now, we would definitely have kind of gone at this from a product perspective. So we would have developed Scout Scheduling, made it a software product, made it a tool, and sold it as a package. Limited traction with teams, I mentioned that, very cluttered space with a lot of analysts out there. We like this area, partner with some teams to go do great things because they have reputations and relationships that we don't. And then for us, we've kind of wedded ourselves to fftoolbox.com. And hopefully, if you're a football fantasy player, spend $30 and buy some advanced analytics system. I think that's, and like I said, I know I kind of ran right up to the end. My contact info on there, but I guess we got probably maybe a couple quick minutes. If anybody does have a question, I'll answer them, and I'll stay after as long as you want. Yeah.
So you talked a lot about players and how they perform and things like that. You get questions around, well, I've got a basketball team and I wanna analyze how zone defense and man-to-man versus triangle offense, those sorts of questions too. What player lineup should I have to maximize my runs scored?
And one of the challenges is it's hard. You got to get ingrained with a team so they'll open up and tell you what they really want to ask you. But as the sport view data becomes more and more prevalent, that's the type of stuff they're trying to answer. Because you can pick up formations and high screens, low screens, moving screens, all that kind of stuff, to now start looking at team lineup, team strategy. Who do I play when? Who do I play at the beginning of the game, the end of the game? And depending on, do you take an offensive minded or defensive minded? But I'll just tell you up front is we haven't got kind of wedded close enough to a team to get that far down in the discussion. I think there was a question back there. Quick.
Yeah, just kind of got a specific situation. So
Yeah.
I'm a faculty member at kind of lower level Division I
Yeah.
NCAA school. We just fired our coach in basketball, thank goodness. And hired another one. He's coming from a larger institution where they had sports view, they had access to tons of analytics, they had all the data they needed, that kind of stuff. So from a selfish perspective, I'm viewing this as an opportunity to get in with the coach
Yeah.
and say, look, what can we do for you? I know you're coming from a data-rich environment, you're coming to one that's not data-rich at all. The previous staff wasn't doing jack, be on the board or anywhere else. So, what can I do as someone who's interested in this area to break
Right.
in? I mean, this isn't within my own institution. This isn't going out into, the broad public. This
Yeah.
is going across campus.
The biggest thing that we find, the early traction that makes the most sense and is incredibly helpful up front, is just helping them get a handle on their data and providing some ability to look at data, to parse data, to understand how to collect data. Most universities don't even collect data. So just going in and saying, hey, let's develop some easy kind of infrastructure basis so when your scouts are going out there, they're at least collecting the same type of information. So I would say is you try to get them to understand this is where you want to be, but what can I do up front? And some of it's just simple data visualization, and so that's what we've been doing is, just helping them. What data do I collect? Once I look at it, how can I parse it? I mean, just parsing data, they don't know how to do, right? So that way, because then you get them thinking of like, oh, could you answer this? Could you answer this? And then you kind of got it's kind of the hook, you got to kind of hook them. We call it the crack cocaine model, but give them a little bit, right? Give them a little bit, because then they start going, wow, this is really cool. Could you? So I would say that's probably where you really want to start is help them just set up a data collection infrastructure, right? And then once you get a little bit of data, help them start going through the data so they can visualize it and see it. And very quickly, that's the nice thing about decision makers, very quickly, when they see it, they get hungry for it. That's why we're going more and more to the data visualization realm, is because when I show them in a heat map, they get very excited. I show them blue dots on a map, very excited. And then I go, well, but there's some really cool math behind that I could do. And they go, okay, go ahead and go do that. Here's your Oreos, here's your Mountain Dew, go in the closet, come back when you have an answer. But yeah, I'd say that the upfront data piece and then just some simple visualization stuff. Yeah.
Do you think, in terms of where you're going to take the company, do you think it's going to be down the fantasy path and doing revenue sharing deals?
Yeah. That'd be a good question for, call me in September. We're banking a lot on the fantasy, only because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I mean, full-time fantasy has 10 million users. So, I mean, we're all math people. My percentage of migration from a free site to a premium site does not have to be very big
Right.
with a revenue sharing deal, right? So we'll see. So we're going to go with this. We were going to do our own website, try to grow from scratch.
Right.
Instead, we partner with FF Toolbox, and we've partnered with some other folks in some silent capacities. So we'll see. I think I'm betting on, okay, that's where the revenue is. I'm pretty comfortable it's not team consultation.
Right.
Even if we got, like, the Golden State Warriors loves what we're doing, at the most, they're going to use this as a kind of an offside consultant. There's never going to be, I'm trying to grow about a 6-person team in sports analytics. Okay, quick numbers, a 6-person team, we're talking over $1 million a year in revenue I got to pull in, right? It's not from team consultation. Business to business, maybe. I mean, a company like Stats, I mean, they're the provider in the space. So, but they're also incredibly busy. So, we're trying to tease some stuff out of them. So I'm hopeful. I mean, if not, I'll tell you, hey, do sports on the side. Have a blast doing it, but keep your day job. So we'll see. Any other last? Going once? Twice? All right, well, I appreciate your time. Thanks.